You think you know the American tall tale. You see a flannel-shirted giant with a blue ox, a comforting caricature of strength and industry. On the surface, this is just folklore, a collection of harmless campfire stories born from the oral tradition of a young nation. Underneath the laughter, however, in the deep, unmapped woods of the 19th century, something else was stirring. Something far older and darker than Paul Bunyan. What you were told as a bedtime story began its life as a warning label, etched in fear on the edge of a dying fire. The true legends were not about heroes. They were about the things that hunted heroes. They were whispered by frontiersmen huddled together for warmth and safety in the vast, crushing silence of the American wilderness. These men, isolated for months or even years, exchanged tales that would filter down through generations, contributing to the bedrock of national myths, birthing modern urban legends of hook-handed men and phantom beasts like Bigfoot. But while figures like Bunyan became sanitized icons, the real heart of their tradition was deliberately left behind in the woods. The focus of their darkest hours was never on what they could build, but on what could unmake them in a single night. They spoke of the monsters, an entire ecosystem of predators known collectively as fearsome critters. This term, fearsome critters, is not a simple label, but a vast and chilling classification. It is a field guide to a North America that no longer exists, a continent teeming with impossible animals born from the anxieties of men pushed to their absolute limit. A few of these names have trickled into modern culture, their teeth filed down into jokes. You may have heard of the snipe, a creature now synonymous with the prank of a fruitless hunt, or the Hodag of Wisconsin, a horned beast that has been reduced to a local mascot. These are the survivors, the domesticated ghosts of a much more terrifying pantheon. Their true nature, and that of their forgotten brethren, was never meant for tourists or children. It was a language of survival spoken by men who knew the forest was not empty. For generations, these creatures existed only in the spoken word, a purely oral tradition passed from one exhausted logger to the next. They were as real and as ephemeral as the shadows cast by the flames, living and dying with the breath of the storyteller. There were no books, no official records, only the shared memory of a community of men who faced death daily. The stories were a living entity, mutating and adapting with each telling, shaped by the landscape, the weather, and the particular fears of that specific night. A creature described in a Michigan camp might gain new, more terrible attributes by the time the tale reached the woods of Maine, its evolution driven by the immediate terrors of its new environment. It was not until the early 1900s that a handful of men, scholars and former woodsmen, realized this entire nocturnal world was on the verge of extinction. The great forests were falling, the logging camps were modernizing, and the culture that had given birth to these monsters was fading into memory. To prevent their complete loss, these men began a frantic effort of documentation, transcribing the oral histories before the last storytellers fell silent. This act of preservation gives us our primary evidence, our case files on the impossible. Two of these compilations stand as foundational texts: William T. Cox's 1910 edition of Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods and Henry H. Tryon's 1930s edition of Fearsome Critters. These books are not fairy tales. They read like forensic reports from another reality. Alongside these major works, other resources provide corroborating testimony. Collections like Yarns of the Big Woods gathered tales that had been printed in the fleeting, disposable newspaper articles of the time, capturing fragments of the broader tradition. Today, digital archives like the website lumberwoods.org serve as a comprehensive library, a morgue for these prominent fearsome critters, allowing us to piece together the evidence that was so nearly lost forever. But this evidence is not clean. It is contradictory, fragmented, and haunted by its very nature. Because these tales were born from spoken word, their details are perilously inconsistent. The exact size, habits, and hunting methods of a single creature can vary wildly from one account to the next. The oral tradition was a river, not a stone tablet, and its currents changed the shape of everything it carried. One narrator might describe a beast with saw-like teeth, Another might insist its true danger was a hypnotic call, and a third might swear it was a creature made of pure shadow. The stories were not memorized scripts, they were living performances, tailored to the audience and the moment. This makes the work of an investigator difficult, forcing a careful cross-examination of every source. Even the foundational published books often present overlapping, but jarringly different portraits of the same animal. The characteristics recorded by Cox in one decade might be subtly or drastically altered in the later work by Tryon. This is not a failure of the authors, but a perfect reflection of the source material. It shows us a mythology that was never codified, a belief system that was always in flux. When these critical discrepancies exist, our only reliable method is to treat the oldest recorded version of a tale as the primary document. This allows us to establish a foundational understanding, a baseline from which we can track the story's mutations and understand what the original fear was truly about. To understand why these men needed such monsters, you must first understand the life they led. The existence of a lumberjack in the northern United States during the late 1800s was a relentless ordeal. Their work was brutally arduous, a daily battle against immense trees and a hostile climate with only the most limited and dangerous technology. They were isolated in remote camps for the majority of the year, cut off from family, society, and the safety of civilization. Death was a constant and intimate companion, arriving in the form of falling trees, snapping cables, crushing machinery, or the simple, creeping cold. It was a life of profound monotony, punctuated by moments of extreme terror. In this crucible of exhaustion and dread, storytelling became more than entertainment. It was a psychological necessity. It was a way for these men to process the unrelenting stress and the ambient terror of the deep woods. They took the formless, crushing anxiety of their environment and gave it a name, a shape, and a set of behaviors. By transforming the perceived menace of the forest into a bestiary of specific, characterful creatures, they could engage with it, laugh at it, and even, in a way, control it. The monster could be outsmarted. The crushing weight of a hostile world could not. This process of transformation was not abstract, it was grounded in the physical world around them. When loggers encountered strange natural phenomena, things they could not immediately explain, they did not reach for scientific analysis. They reached for their mythology. A set of trees found bent into unnatural, corkscrew shapes was not the result of a peculiar wind pattern or disease. It was the clear evidence of a passing wampus cat. A bizarre track in the snow, a strange echo across a frozen lake, the unnerving silence that sometimes fell upon the woods, all of these became signs, clues left behind by the unseen population of fearsome critters. The world became a text, and they were the only ones who knew how to read it. You must remember the context of their time. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, information was not widespread or instantaneous. For men working in these profoundly isolated camps, the line between the known and the unknown was thin and porous. Without encyclopedias, wildlife documentaries, or the internet, the existence of such bizarre creatures seemed entirely plausible. The continent was still revealing its secrets, and tales of strange new animals were common. In that world, an embellished story about a creature that walked backward to confuse trackers did not sound like fantasy. It sounded like a credible report from a neighboring territory. Henry H. Tryon, in the preface to his invaluable collection, noted the genesis of these tales with the sharp eye of a man who had lived in the woods. He observed that many of these elaborate legends likely began with a single, simple event. A seasoned woodsman, alone and far from camp, being startled by an unexpected noise or a fleeting shape in the failing light after sundown. A snapping twig, the cry of an unseen owl, a shadow that moved when it should not have. These are the seeds of monsters. That small, personal moment of primal fear was the kernel of truth that would be carried back to the relative safety of the campfire. Once back at camp, that raw, startling experience would be meticulously embellished. It was not enough to say, "I was frightened." The experience had to be translated into a narrative, given structure and meaning. The storyteller would take that initial jolt of adrenaline and build a creature around it, giving it a history, a motive, and a unique method of killing. The simple, unnerving sound becomes the mating call of a hidebehind. The fleeting shadow becomes a glimpse of the elusive gumbaroo. This act of creation was a way to master the fear, to take ownership of it by turning it into a story that could be shared, analyzed, and ultimately survived. These stories held profound cultural significance for the men who told them. To have an encounter with a fearsome critter and to live to tell the tale elevated a man's status. It transformed his brutal, often thankless labor into something epic. His life was not just a grim cycle of cutting down trees, it was a series of narrow escapes from legendary beasts. This narrative reframing made their challenging lives feel more important, more meaningful. They were not merely workers, they were adventurers and survivors on the last American frontier, charting a world filled with dangers that tamer men in the cities could never comprehend. A very specific and effective storytelling method often emerged around the fire, a collaborative performance designed for maximum impact. The ritual typically involved two experienced narrators working in tandem to weave an embroidered tale for the benefit of the uninitiated. One man, the primary storyteller, would lead with the descriptions of the creature, laying out its appearance, its habits, its weaknesses. The second man would then interject at key moments, not to add details about the beast itself, but to add his own harrowing, personal experiences of near misses and terrifying encounters, validating the first man's claims with the power of an eyewitness account. The primary purpose of this sophisticated, two-man storytelling technique was to convince new or less experienced woodsmen of the absolute reality of these creatures. It was a carefully orchestrated piece of theater designed to blur the line between fact and fiction. For a young logger, new to the camp, and already intimidated by the immense and dangerous woods, hearing two respected veterans calmly exchange stories about a beast that dissolved its victims in poisonous saliva was not entertainment. It was a vital safety briefing, a lesson in a biology he had to learn quickly if he wanted to see the spring. This leads us to one of the most common and practical applications of the fearsome critter narratives, the hazing of new loggers. These stories became a tool for social conditioning within the hyper-masculine, hierarchical world of the logging camp. The tales were used to terrify newcomers, to test their nerve and solidify their place at the bottom of the pecking order. Greenhorns were frequently sent on impossible, dangerous-sounding errands, such as hunting for a snipe or fetching a bucket of steam from the yard engine. The real purpose was to watch them struggle, to reinforce the authority of the veterans, and to use fear as an instrument of initiation. Ultimately, these narratives were a powerful engine for enchantment. They took the raw, often ugly material of daily life in the wilderness and transformed it. An ordinary encounter, a strange noise, a moment of confusion, these were all imbued with a layer of profound mystery and thrilling excitement. The world of the logger was physically exhausting and spiritually draining, but through these stories, it became a place of wonder and terror, a landscape alive with secrets. The forest was no longer just a resource to be harvested, it was a kingdom, and they were its unwilling, terrified, but deeply engaged inhabitants. This was never meant to make children sleep. It was meant to make them wake up. In the last chapter, we established that these stories are not jokes. We uncovered how the isolation of the frontier, the constant proximity to death, and the vast, unmapped wilderness created a psychological landscape where monsters were not just possible, but necessary. They were a language for fear. Now we examine the evidence these creatures left behind, not in bone, but in the warnings they embody. We begin in the north, in the cold timberlands, where the line between civilization and the unknown was nothing more than a row of trees. You are told of the Hodag, an animal of the Lake States, wandering from western Wisconsin and northern Minnesota deep into the Canadian wilds toward Hudson Bay. It is a creature born of exhaustion and unending labor. Its size is compared to a moose, a familiar benchmark for any woodsman, but the similarities end there. The animal is a biological impossibility, a living monument to restlessness. Its legs are described as being entirely without joints, rigid pillars that condemn it to a life of perpetual motion, for it can never lie down to rest. This detail is not whimsy. It is a direct reflection of the logger's life, a profession where to stop moving was to freeze or to fall behind, a constant forward momentum against the brutal cold and the endless work. The Hodag is the spirit of the job made flesh. Its physical form is a catalogue of deformities and hardships. The long upper lip, so cumbersome it cannot graze without plowing its own face into the earth, speaks to a fundamental awkwardness, a creature ill-suited to its environment yet forced to survive within it. Its head and neck are hairless and leathery, the skin worn raw by exposure. The ears are corrugated, flopping downward as if perpetually defeated. It has the four-toed feet and shaggy coat of something prehistoric, an entity that should not exist in the modern world but persists nonetheless. Its long, bushy tail seems an afterthought, a final, strange appendage on a body assembled from anxieties. The Hodag is the embodiment of a life of thankless toil, misshapen by the very adaptations it needs to endure. This creature is more than a curiosity. It is a cautionary tale about the wilderness itself. It possesses a compulsion for constant travel, an aimless migration that mirrors the way a man could get lost in these vast forests. We are told that few hunters who gave chase ever returned to camp, and fewer still ever saw the beast. The pursuit of the Hodag is a metaphor for being swallowed by the woods, for following a false trail until disorientation and the elements claim you. During the day, it browses on twigs, its strange lip wrapping around trees to strip the bark, a slow, desperate form of sustenance. It is always eating, yet always moving, never satisfied, never at peace. This is the specter that haunted every man who worked the timber line, a life of constant movement that leads nowhere. Its vulnerability is as specific as its anatomy. At night, unable to rest properly, the Hodag must lean against a tree. It braces its rigid hind legs and marks time with its front ones, a sleepless, rhythmic vigil in the dark. This is the moment of opportunity for the hunter, the chink in the armor of this relentless beast. The prescribed method of capture is not a fair chase, but a calculated trap. A woodsman would find a tree on the creature's path and notch it, cutting it just enough so that a modest weight would bring it down. When the exhausted Hodag leans against the prepared tree for its nightly imitation of sleep, the trunk gives way. The tree and the beast collapse together, and the jointless legs that carried it across miles of wilderness become its prison, leaving it helpless on the forest floor. The end of the Hogag's story is recorded with the flat finality of a coroner's report. The last known specimen was killed on the Turtle River in northern Minnesota. It was a young one, already weighing 1,800 pounds, found not by a clever trap, but by misfortune. It was stuck in the mud, its powerful, rigid legs finally failing it. It was dispatched by a man named Mike Flynn of Cass Lake. The story does not celebrate this as a great hunt. It is the sad, pathetic end of a creature defined by struggle, its immense power and endurance ultimately neutralized by a simple patch of soft earth. The killing of the last Hodag was not a triumph. It was putting a suffering animal out of its misery. We move now to a different coast, a different fear. The Guimaro is a creature of the Pacific Northwest, a specter born from fog and fire. It is said to inhabit the coastal region from Gray's Harbor in Washington down to Humboldt Bay in California. This is a land of giants, of colossal cedar trees, and the Guimaro is a thing that dwells in their remains. It is described as an exceedingly rare creature, one that hides in the hollowed-out bases of massive, burned-out cedars. It is a creature of ash and shadow, emerging only for what are called frightful marauding expeditions. During these forays, it is driven by a hunger that cannot be sated, an emptiness that mirrors the hollow logs it calls home. Its appetite is the stuff of legend. The Guimaro is said to consume anything that even remotely resembles food. It is capable of devouring an entire horse in a single sitting, an act it performs without any visible discomfort and, crucially, without ever reaching satiation. This is not the hunger of a predator, it is the hunger of a void. Its appearance reinforces this connection to fire and ruin. It is coal-black, a coloration witnesses speculated might not be natural pigment, but the permanent charring from the burnt wood in which it lives. Its size is comparable to a black bear, another familiar yardstick, but its body is unnervingly wrong. It is almost entirely hairless, save for prominent eyebrows and a few bristly hairs on its chin, features that give it a strange, almost human-like face on an alien body. The creature's physiology is its most terrifying aspect. Its skin is described as smooth, tough, and shiny, entirely without wrinkles. It is a tireless traveler when searching for food, but it is not fast. It shows no fear, no anger, no annoyance toward any enemy that confronts it. This unnerving calm comes from its perfect defense. The gumero's hide is said to be so elastic that it repels any attack with equal force. A charging elk that strikes it would be thrown back. A swarm of angry hornets would bounce off its skin. Thrown rocks, even bullets, are said to rebound from its body, turning the attacker's own force against them. It is a creature that cannot be harmed from the outside. Yet, this invulnerable beast is exceptionally rare. Its great defense is tied directly to its great weakness. The gumero's body is reported to be highly combustible. The same properties that make its hide elastic also make it intensely flammable. It is a creature perfectly adapted to survive any predator, but completely defenseless against the environment it has chosen. Forest fires, a common feature of the cedar forests, are its undoing. Woodmen near Coos Bay reported hearing things during and after great fires, sounds that were not the crack and fall of timber. They described loud, explosive reports and the accompanying smell of burning rubber, a scent entirely out of place in the forest. These were believed to be the sounds of gumeros, caught in the flames, their impervious bodies finally failing them, exploding from the intense heat. From the damp coast, we travel inland to the arid foothills of the Sierra Nevada. Here, where the digger pine clings to the rocky slopes, you will find stories of the roprite. This creature is a mystery, its life history almost entirely unknown. The loggers and prospectors who spoke of it debated its origins endlessly. Was it born? Did it hatch from an egg, or did it simply emerge, fully formed, from the dark caverns of the mountains? This lack of a natural history makes it something otherworldly, something that does not belong to the normal cycle of life and death. It is a pure predator, without context or cause. The local Digger Indians had their own explanation, one steeped in a history of conflict and fear. They believed the roprites were not animals at all, but the vengeful spirits of deceased early Spanish ranchers. Their oral traditions were filled with terrifying tales of being pursued by these creatures, a story that recasts the roprite as a form of supernatural justice or historical retribution. The creature's method of attack is chillingly specific. It captures its victims with what is described as a marvelous rope-like beak, a long, flexible snout that it uses as a lasso. Once ensnared, the victim is not killed quickly. They are dragged to their death through the thorny chaparral, a brutal, agonizing end. The roprite is a master of its harsh environment. It is an exceptionally fast animal, said to easily outpace the roadrunner, the very symbol of speed in this landscape. It moves with a strange, half-flying, half-bounding motion, perfectly suited to the rugged, broken terrain. Its skin is leathery, completely unaffected by the sharp thorns of the chaparral that would shred any other creature. Its legs, described as flipper-like, are equally impervious to the sharp rocks underfoot. It is a creature built for pursuit in a landscape that offers no escape. A man named A.B. Patterson from Hot Springs, California, claimed to have seen the last authentically reported roprite, and he added one more terrifying detail to its profile. According to him, the animal has a large set of rattles on its tail, like those of a rattlesnake but magnified. As the roprite gives chase, these rattles vibrate, producing a loud, worrying sound that disorients its prey. The sound of a giant rattlesnake, a primal warning of danger, becomes the soundtrack to your own death. The cry went out among the lumbermen operating between the Pitt River and the southern Sierras to try and capture a living specimen for study. But the roprite, a creature of pure, relentless pursuit, was never caged. We descend now into the swamps, the cypress wetlands of the southern United States, particularly the dark waters around Lake Okeechobee in Florida. Here we find the snallygaster. This is not a creature of subtlety. It is a thing of immense size and voracious appetite, and its preferred food is explicitly stated to be human beings. It is a predator that exists solely to hunt us. The tales describe it as resembling a large crocodile, a familiar swamp menace, but with grotesque additions. Its body is covered in long, glossy fur, and it has no legs or fins in the conventional sense. It is a creature of pure, streamlined malice. Its method of propulsion is a biomechanical nightmare. It moves through the water and mud with two specialized organs, a single long spike on its back and a tail that ends in 3 bony plates. These plates are said to function like a steamboat's propeller, revolving at incredible speed to drive the creature forward like a torpedo boat. But the tail is not just for movement, it is also a weapon and a tool. The snallygaster impales its victims with it, tossing a child or an adult onto the sharp dorsal spike. It will continue this horrific harvest, collecting several people on its back before it stops to feed. The feeding process is a scene of industrial horror. Once the snallygaster has gathered a sufficient meal, it drives its propeller tail into the soft mud of the swamp floor, rapidly scooping out a hole. It then scrapes its victims off the spike, dropping them into this makeshift bowl. Then, using its revolving tail plates as a grinder, it pulverizes the bodies into a paste before inhaling the slurry. This is not predation as nature understands it. This is mechanical processing, a terrifying fusion of the natural and the industrial, turning a living creature into an abattoir. One account, from a Mr. Inman F. Eldridge of Dunellen Springs, Florida, gives this creature a strange and chilling role as an arbiter of justice. Eldridge was in the swamp when he saw what he believed to be a notorious local outlaw. The man was impaled on what looked like a cypress knee, a common feature of the swamp. But then the cypress knee began to move. Eldridge realized he was looking at the dorsal spike of a snallygaster, which had already claimed the criminal. Eldridge had a clear shot, but he chose not to take it. He reasoned that the creature's terrifying presence in the swamps served a purpose. It kept evildoers from using the wetlands as a hiding place. In his eyes, the snallygaster was not a monster to be slain, but a form of brutal, impartial justice that policed the lawless places where men could not. From the dark heart of the American wilderness, we turn to a creature imported from the Old World, a monster that shows how a new environment can corrupt an old story. The leprechaun you think you know does not exist here. According to the lore of the lumber camps, several young leprechauns were brought from Northern Ireland to a camp on the Petawawa River in early Upper Canada, now Ontario. Even in Ireland, the animal was said to be rare, and the story claims it was driven to extinction there during the famine, when starving Irishmen were forced to eat the last remaining specimens. This detail alone transforms the creature from a magical being into a mere animal, a source of food. In its native land, the leprechaun was a harmless, playful creature. It was known for its agility, for turning somersaults and leaping about. Its favorite trick was to bore into piles of peat and then spring out, sending clouds of peat dust high into the air like a small cyclone. It was a creature of mischief, not malice. But its introduction to the harsh, unforgiving landscape of Canada changed its very nature. The familiar, gentle hills of Ireland were replaced by vast, menacing swamps, and the creature was twisted by this new reality. The change was not gradual, it was a profound transformation of disposition. It became something to be feared and avoided. The captured leprechauns soon escaped their handlers and fled into the nearby tamarack swamps. There, they thrived. They multiplied and spread, colonizing the upper Ottawa region and even crossing into northern Michigan. They became a new kind of predator, perfectly adapted to this wetland environment. They were known for sneaking through the dense tamarack and cedar, leaping across the treacherous muskegs in search of food. Their playful leaps were now the movements of a hunter. Their prey became the men who worked the supply lines. Teamsters driving wagons along the swamp roads reported being ambushed by these creatures. The leprechauns would bound over the loads of supplies, snapping their teeth and reaching with sharp claws. They were no longer mischievous sprites, they were violent thieves. For a driver caught in such an attack, the only option was to flee, to abandon the team and the wagon and run for the safety of thick timber. It was said that a frightened man could just outpace a leprechaun in the tangled undergrowth of the tamarack. The creature that once guarded a pot of gold now stole bacon and flour, a grim downgrade that speaks to the brutal pragmatism of the frontier. This was the Irish folklore stripped of all its charm, leaving only a feral, evil thing in its place. In the desolate landscapes of California, we find a creature whose entire existence is a slow march toward a spectacular death. This is the funeral mountain terror shot, and its story is an attempt to explain the ominous name of the funeral range. The creature itself is a living coffin. Its body is described as casket-shaped, 6 to 8 feet long, with a hard shell running the length of its back. It walks on 4 long, wobbly legs, giving it an uncertain, swaying gait as it travels. It is an animal that looks like it is already part of a funeral procession. Mormon immigrants were the first to report seeing the beast. They witnessed a bizarre procession emerging from the high mountain range and marching out into the desert. They also witnessed the creature's inescapable, tragic fate. The terror shots live and breed in high-altitude meadows and parks, sheltered and cool. As their numbers increase, they are seized by a powerful, inexplicable migratory impulse. They form long, single-file lines and begin to march, leaving the safety of the mountains and heading into the open desert, apparently intending to cross to some distant mountain range on the other side. They never make it. Not a single one ever succeeds. The moment they encounter the hot sands of the desert floor, a fatal process begins. Their bodies rapidly distend with the heat, swelling like balloons until they can no longer contain the pressure. They explode. The sound of these explosions is said to echo through the desert canyons, a series of resounding reports marking the end of their doomed journey. Each explosion leaves behind a deep, grave-shaped hole in the sand. This creature provides a grimly humorous explanation for any strange depressions found in the desert. A story that papers over the much grimmer reality of hastily dug graves and the rampant grave robbing that was a feature of the American West. From the desert floor, we climb into the high peaks of Colorado to slopes steeper than 45 degrees. This is the domain of the slide rock bolter. This creature is an engine of destruction, a predator that uses gravity as its weapon. It has an immense head, small eyes, and a mouth like a sculpin, gaping from ear to ear. Its most crucial feature is its tail, which is described as a divided flipper equipped with enormous grab hooks. With these hooks, it anchors itself to the very crest of a mountain, hanging there, motionless, for days at a time. It waits and watches the gulches below for any sign of life. Its preferred prey, the stories say, are tourists. When it spots a victim, the process is swift and devastating. It lifts its tail, releasing its grip on the mountainside, and simply lets go. It slides down the slope, its descent accelerated by a thin skid grease that drools from the corners of its mouth. It is an avalanche of flesh and teeth. It moves with such speed and momentum that it simply scoops up its victims without breaking stride. Entire parties of tourists are said to have been swallowed in a single, terrifying pass. The creature's own momentum carries it up the opposite slope of the gulch, where it once again latches on with its tail hooks and resumes its silent, patient vigil. The existence of the bolter cast a pall over the region. Forest guides operating between Offer Peaks and Lizard Head became deeply cautious about leading parties too far into the hills. The creature was also a menace to the environment itself. Its repeated descents carved destructive paths through the forests, uprooting or mowing down mature spruce trees as if they were grass. The evidence of its passage was a scar on the landscape, a perfect explanation for the strange, linear clearings sometimes caused by landslides or avalanches. The story culminates in a plan to destroy one of these creatures. A local forest ranger, tired of the destruction, devised a trap. He constructed a dummy tourist, filling it with giant powder and fulminate caps. He dressed the decoy in a plaid Norfolk jacket and knee breeches, and propped it up with a Colorado guidebook in its hands, placing it in a conspicuous location. For days, a particularly large bolter had been seen hanging on the slope of Lizard Head. The decoy worked. The creature released its hold and came hurtling down the mountain. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. It reportedly flattened half the buildings in the nearby town of Rico, which were never rebuilt. For the rest of the summer, flocks of buzzards circled the site, drawn by the remains of the beast. We travel east again, to the logging country of Maine, from the Rangeley Lakes to the Allagash, and across the border into New Brunswick. Here, woodsmen spoke of the tote-road shagamaw, a creature that was a source of endless confusion and argument. The shagamaw's unique nature caused disputes over something fundamental to a woodsman's identity: the ability to read tracks. Misidentifying an animal's trail was a serious insult, a sign of incompetence, and the shagamaw's bizarre tracks could lead to fistfights among proud loggers. Only a few old, experienced timber cruisers and rivermen knew the secret behind the tracks that seemed to magically change. One such man was Gus Demo of Oldtown, Maine, a hunter and logger of 40 years. He recounted following a set of fresh moose tracks down a tote road. After exactly 80 rods, a quarter of a mile, the tracks abruptly changed. They were now unmistakably bear tracks. Demo was baffled but continued on. Another 80 rods later, they changed back to moose tracks. This pattern repeated consistently, a perfect, measured transformation every quarter mile. And the animal, whatever it was, always stayed on the tote road or followed a blaze line cut by surveyors. It was following the paths made by men. Eventually, Gus Demo caught sight of the creature itself, and the mystery was solved. The animal had the front feet of a bear and the hind feet of a moose. It walked with a careful, measured pace, taking steps of exactly 1 yard. Then, suddenly, it would stop, look around, and in a single, fluid motion, pivot and invert itself, walking only on its front feet. Demo realized this inversion happened at a section corner, a survey marker. He concluded the shagamaw was an imitative animal. It had spent its life watching surveyors, timber cruisers, and trappers as they paced out their lines through the woods. The shagamaw, he theorized, had learned to count, but only up to 440, the number of paces in a quarter mile. Upon reaching this number, it had to stop and reset, inverting itself to continue its count. This creature is a wonderfully specific piece of folklore, a myth created to solve a very particular problem. It provides a fantastical explanation for any ambiguous or confusing animal tracks a logger might find, allowing him to save face and attribute the mystery not to his own lack of skill, but to the work of a creature that walks on 2 kinds of feet. From the practical jokes of the Maine woods, we return to the damp forests of the Pacific coast and eastward to the St. Joe River in North Idaho. Here we find a small, quaint beast known as the whistling wumpus, or wally. It is about the size of a dachshund, but it is not a canine. Loggers claim the wally had a highly specialized diet. It ate only shelf fungus, the woody conchs that grow on the sides of trees, and it would pursue this food even to the very top of a 100-foot dead fir. It was a creature defined by its strange and singular obsession. Its method of climbing was as peculiar as its diet. Its feet and toes were said to be like a woodpecker's, allowing it to grip the bark, and it moved up the trunk by humping itself along like a measuring worm. Its ascent was aided by a tail that was spiked at the tip, which it could use as a brace. But the strangest property of the wally was discovered only after its death. A lumberjack on the Humphchilips River in Washington shot one and, admiring its velvety hide, decided to make a pair of mittens from it. He tanned the hide and sewed the mittens with the fur side out. The moment he put them on and picked up his axe, he discovered their magical property. The mittens began to work their way up the wooden handle, pulling his hands with them. No matter how tightly he gripped, the fur inexorably climbed. If he dropped the axe, the mittens would continue to move on their own, creeping over logs and forest litter, always trying to go up. The wally's hide retained the creature's lifelong instinct to climb. This story became a seed for other tall tales, a setup for storytelling competitions where one lumberjack might describe another getting stuck at the top of a tree, unable to remove his climbing wally skin gloves. Let us turn now to the great cactus districts of the Southwest, a landscape that gives birth to a creature of thirst and revelry. The cactus cat is most abundant between Prescott and Tucson, Arizona, but has also been reported in Old Mexico and the cholla-covered hills of Yucatan. This animal is perfectly adapted to its prickly environment. Its body is covered in thorny hair with especially long, rigid thorns on its ears. Its tail is branched, like a cactus, and its forearms possess a unique weapon, sharp, knife-like blades of bone. The cat uses these blades for a very specific purpose, to harvest the juice of the giant saguaro cactus. Over the course of several nights, it travels a large circuit through the desert, using its bone knives to slash the base of cactus after cactus. It does not drink immediately. It waits. By the time it returns to the first cactus it cut, the sap that has oozed from the wound has had time to ferment in the hot sun, turning into a potent, intoxicating mezcal. The thirsty beast then returns and greedily laps up the alcoholic sap. The stories say it becomes fiddled and drunk. In its intoxicated state, the cactus cat goes wailing off in the moonlight, rasping its bony forearms across each other and screaming with delight. It is a creature whose entire life cycle revolves around getting drunk. This tale provides a whimsical explanation for any real-world discoveries of cacti that appear to have been bled of their sap, transforming a simple natural occurrence into evidence of a debauched feline phantom. Finally, we return to Wisconsin and Minnesota to confront the most famous of these creatures, the Hodag. This beast is a canvas upon which countless anxieties have been painted. Woodsmen have described it with wild variations. Some claim it is covered in horns and spines, a creature of pure maniacal aggression. But the most authentic description, the one from which sketches were made, paints a different picture. It describes the Hodag as being the size of a rhinoceros and somewhat resembling one in form. It is slow-moving, deliberate, and unlike a rhino, highly intelligent. Its appearance is bizarre and unsettling. Its body is hairless, but its skin is covered in striking patterns of mottling, stripes, and checks. The original account notes that these patterns are reminiscent of the macabre clothing sometimes seen in the lumberwoods, suggesting the creature is mimicking the very men who fear it. Instead of a horn on its nose, it has a large, spade-shaped bony growth with strange flanges. This shovel-like protuberance extends up in front of its eyes, severely limiting its vision. The Hodag can only see straight up. This strange disability is said to be the reason for its slow, deliberate movements, as it must wander through the spruce woods, constantly looking skyward for its food. The Hodag's primary food source is the porcupine. Upon spotting one rolled up in the high branches of a spruce tree, the Hodag's hunt begins. It blinks, licks its chops, and begins to methodically spade around the base of the tree with its shovel nose, cutting through the roots until the great spruce begins to totter. It then backs away, takes a running start, and rams its bony spade under the weakened root ball, heaving the entire tree over. The fall stuns the porcupine, leaving it helpless. The Hodag then straddles the fallen trunk, walks to the top, and crushes the porcupine with its massive, pointed hoofs before swallowing it whole, head first. The creature's annual cycle ends with a strange ritual of hibernation. In the autumn, the Hodag seeks out a spruce or pine tree and strips the bark, covering its entire body in the sticky pitch. Then, it finds a patch of hardwood timber with a thick carpet of dead leaves and rolls in them until it is completely encased. This thick, warm mantle of leaves serves as its winter coat, and it hibernates until spring. But this is not the end of the Hodag's story. Modern legends have expanded upon this foundation, transforming the creature into something far more sinister. It is now said to live deep within caves, to smell of rot and decay, and to have been born from the ashes of overworked oxen, returning from the grave to seek revenge on the cruel masters who worked them to death. Each of these creatures, from the jointless Hodag to the drunken cactus cat, is a piece of a psychological puzzle. They are the explanations for strange noises in the woods, for unaccountable tracks in the mud, for the sudden, violent clearing of a mountainside. They are personifications of the dangers of the job and the madness of isolation. But these are just the creatures of the land and the swamp. The next set of evidence takes us into a realm of even greater absurdity, where the laws of nature are not just bent, but shattered entirely. We must now examine the things that haunt the air itself. You have been told that these were just tall tales, campfire stories to pass the time in the suffocating darkness of the deep woods. As we established, they were more than that. They were a coded language, a living folklore created by men pushed to the very edge of sanity by isolation and a hostile environment. Now, we will examine the evidence itself. We will perform an autopsy on the beasts that haunted their minds, starting with the ones born not of aggression, but of profound sorrow. What you are about to hear is not a catalog of jokes. It is a bestiary of anxieties. First, we travel to the hemlock forests of Pennsylvania, a region known for its deep shadows and perpetual gloom. It is here, and almost nowhere else, that you find the trail of the squonk. This creature is an anomaly, known only to those who have spent enough time in that specific wilderness to learn its secrets. Its range is strangely restricted, a detail that suggests it is not merely a fantasy, but a manifestation of a localized despair, a spirit of place tied to the dark, oppressive canopy of the hemlocks. It is said to have a deeply retiring disposition, an animal that shuns the light and moves only in the liminal hours of twilight and dusk, when the world is already fading to gray. The source of its misery is etched onto its very being. The squonk's skin is described as ill-fitting, a grotesque covering of warts and moles that hangs loosely upon its frame. This physical description is a portrait of profound self-loathing, a creature so uncomfortable in its own existence that it is in a state of perpetual unhappiness. It is for this reason that it has been called one of the most morbid of beasts. It does nothing but weep, a constant, unending expression of its own wretchedness. For the hunter, or the lonely logger, tracking a squonk is a simple, grim affair. You do not look for footprints, you follow the tear-stained trail it leaves glistening on the forest floor. Its defense mechanism is the ultimate act of self-annihilation. When cornered, when frightened, when its sorrow becomes too great to bear, the squonk is capable of dissolving itself entirely into a pool of its own tears. There is no fight, no attempt to flee, only a complete and total surrender to its grief. Hunters have learned that the most successful hunts occur on frosty, moonlit nights. On these nights, the cold air causes its tears to be shed more slowly, and the creature itself is less inclined to move, paralyzed by the chill. In the deep woods, beneath the boughs of the dark hemlock trees, loggers would claim to hear its quiet, inconsolable weeping, a sound that was less an animal call and more the ambient noise of the forest's own sadness. This creature is not just a fiction, it is a diagnosis. One of the few documented encounters comes from a Mr. J.P. Wentling, who recounted a deeply disappointing experience near Mont Alto. He was a clever man. Hearing the creature's cries, he mimicked its sounds, a call and response of sorrow that coaxed the squonk into a sack he had laid as a trap. He began his journey home, the weight of the creature tangible, the sound of its weeping muffled by the canvas. Then, suddenly, the sack lightened. The weeping ceased. When Mr. Wentling opened the bag, he found nothing inside but a collection of tears and bubbles. The creature had escaped by ceasing to exist, leaving behind only the evidence of its sorrow. From the quiet despair of Pennsylvania, we move to the violent, kinetic terror of the Cumberland Mountains in Tennessee. Here, in the hardwood forests, a different kind of fear gives rise to a different kind of monster. When hunters go missing, when a man vanishes without a trace from a well-worn trail, the woodsmen do not blame disorientation or a simple accident. They speak of the whirling wimp. It is described as a bloodthirsty creature of substantial size, a predator born from the paranoia of ambush. Its form is a nightmare composite, the head and body of a gorilla, but with enormous, oversized front feet, the tools of its unique and horrific method of hunting. The wimp's strategy is one of pure physics. It finds a bend in a trail, a place where a traveler's line of sight is broken, and it waits. Standing on its disproportionately small hind legs, it begins to spin. It rotates faster and faster, a horrifying pirouette that increases in speed until the creature itself becomes invisible, a blur that dissolves into the background foliage. The only evidence of its presence is a strange, low droning sound, a vibration that seems to come not from the ground, but from the trees overhead, a disorienting hum that lures the victim into a state of confusion. The account of Henry H. Tryon confirms this detail. noting the only signs are the low humming and the unnatural sight of leaves being blown about with unusual speed on a windless day. Any creature, human or animal, that fails to recognize this sound as a death knell and steps into the danger zone is annihilated instantly. There is no struggle, no scream. The victim is simply transformed into a syrup or varnish-like substance, a gruesome lacquer smeared across the wimp's huge, spinning paws. To step into its location is to experience instantaneous death. Survival in these woods, then, becomes a matter of listening, of recognizing that the hum in the air is not an insect, but an engine of destruction about to engage. Awareness is the only defense against an enemy you cannot see. Elsewhere, the enemy is not invisible, but vengeful. From the forests of Maine all the way to Oregon, wherever loggers have cut into the ancient woods, they have earned the resentment of the agropultor. This creature leads a life of pure retribution, its existence a direct response to the intrusion of the timber industry. It makes its temporary home in hollow trees, using the very things the loggers seek to destroy as a bastion for its attacks. When a lumberjack is found dead in the woods, the official cause is often a falling limb. The other loggers know better. They know the man was a victim of the agropultor. The creature's aim is described as exceptionally, unnervingly accurate. To be targeted by an agropultor is to be marked for death. Surviving an attack is a near impossibility. One of the few eyewitness accounts comes from a man known as Big Old Cossin, who was cruising timber on the upper St. Croix. He was suddenly knocked to the ground by a partly rotten limb, thrown with incredible force. The wood was so punky, so decayed, that it shattered harmlessly on his head. This stroke of luck allowed him a brief, terrifying glimpse of his attacker before it bounded away into the forest. Cossin's description gives us a clear image of this arboreal assassin. It had a slender, wiry body built for speed and agility. Its face was ape-like, a familiar feature in these tales of woodland horrors, but its most defining characteristic was its arms. They were described as muscular and whip-like, appendages capable of snapping off dead branches and hurling them with the velocity of shells from a 6-inch gun. This creature weaponizes the forest itself, turning the deadwood that litters the canopy into deadly projectiles. Its population is believed to be kept in check only by its diet. It feeds on hoot owls and woodpeckers, and their relative scarcity prevents the agropultor from becoming a more numerous threat. Where the agropultor is a precise and targeted killer, the splinter cat is an agent of pure, indiscriminate destruction. Its territory is vast, reported from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf of Mexico and eastward to the Atlantic, a truly continental nightmare. Its presence is dictated by its food source. It follows the distribution of wild bees and raccoons, which it hunts with a singular, brutal methodology. Every dark and stormy night, when the wind and rain provide cover for its chaos, the splinter cat goes on a rampage, shattering trees in its search for a meal. It does not select its targets with any care. It simply smashes one tree after another, leaving a trail of splintered wood and devastation until it locates a hollow one containing either a raccoon den or a beehive. Its method is terrifyingly simple and brutally effective. The creature climbs a tall tree, using the height to build momentum. It then bounds downward and launches itself across the intervening space towards a target tree, striking it squarely with its incredibly hard face. The force of the impact is catastrophic. The target tree is left broken and shattered, the damage so severe that it resembles a lightning strike or the aftermath of a tornado. In the Gulf states, where windstorms are common, the destruction caused by a single splinter cat is often mistaken for an act of God. Moving north, into the boreal zone and the logging camps of Canada, we encounter a creature born of the snow itself, the snow wasset. It is a migratory animal, its movements dictated by the cruel logic of the northern seasons. It winters in the lumbering region between the Great Lakes and Hudson Bay, but spends its summers far to the north, in Labrador and the Barren Grounds. Unlike nearly every other northern creature, the wasset does something remarkable. It hibernates during the warmest weather. Its hair turns green, a strange camouflage, as it curls up in the cool dampness of a cranberry marsh. During this summer period, it possesses only rudimentary legs, allowing it to creep slowly, staying in the shade, conserving its energy. But after the first great snowstorm of winter, a horrifying transformation occurs. The wasset sheds its useless legs entirely. It now travels southward by dipping and plunging through the deep snow, a movement that makes it remarkably swift and stealthy. This method allows it to become the perfect ambush predator of the winter landscape, seizing burrowing grouse, crouching rabbits, and other skulking varmints from beneath the snowpack. Later in the season, when food becomes scarce, its ambition grows. It will seize wolves, dragging them down into the drifts to be consumed. Woodsmen of the far north hold a grim belief that more tragedies occur beneath the crusted snow than above it, all because of the wasset. Its appetite is described as voracious, comparable to that of a wolverine, but the wasset is 4 times larger and 40 times more active, requiring a proportionally greater amount of food to sustain itself. The only specimen ever examined by white men was an imperfect one, discovered at James Bay. Surveyors there found an indigenous man in a canoe made from a single, greatly stretched wasset hide. The most telling detail was that the hide had no leg holes. This unique white winter pelt was said to be ideal for making these shapely one-man canoes, and was also reportedly used as a type of sled. To trap such a creature, it was believed you needed a battery of deadfalls, a complex trap with triggers set to drop a dozen massive logs from all sides, ensuring that no matter which way the animal moved, it would be pinned and crushed under the snow. From the frozen north, we are drawn to a bizarre and recent arrival in the coast ranges of California. In the spring of 1906, a creature known as the Central American wind tosser mysteriously appeared, having migrated from the Isthmus region. It is not a large beast, but what it lacks in size it makes up for with an extremely mean disposition. The lumberjacks who survived encounters with it had no wish to repeat the experience. The creature's anatomy is a biological impossibility, an affront to nature itself. Its head is attached by a swivel neck, as is its short, tapering tail. Both appendages are capable of spinning at 100 revolutions per minute. Its body is long and triangular, and it is equipped with 3 complete sets of legs, a structure that makes it uniquely adapted to the earthquake-prone country it now inhabits. It is entirely undisturbed by seismic activity. If the floor suddenly becomes the ceiling, the wind tosser simply adapts, using another set of legs. Its bristly hair slants forward at a sharp angle, adding to its chaotic appearance. This animal possesses an extraordinary, almost supernatural resilience. You can shoot it, club it, even run it through with a pike pole, and it will not cease its wriggling, whirling motions or its high-pitched screams of rage. The only known method for killing it is to force it into a flume pipe. The confined space makes all of its feet strike the surface at once. This sensory overload causes it to attempt to walk in 3 different directions simultaneously, a fatal conflict of instinct that literally tears the creature apart. The location of at least one pair of these abominations was known to John Gray of Anadar, who tracked them in the broken country along the Mad River. Our investigation now takes us to a single, isolated location, Boundary Pond in Hurricane Township, northwest Maine. Here, and only here, lives the whimsical creature known as the bildad. It is roughly the size of a beaver, but its features are a strange amalgamation. It has the long, powerful hind legs of a kangaroo, short front legs, webbed feet for swimming, and a heavy, hawk-like bill. Its entire being is designed for a highly specialized and theatrical method of fishing. It crouches on a grassy point overlooking the water, perfectly still, waiting. When a trout rises to the surface to catch a bug, the bildad acts with astonishing swiftness. It does not dive for the fish. Instead, it leaps completely over and past the fish, and as it flies through the air, it brings its heavy, flat tail down onto the water with a resounding smack. The percussive force of the blow stuns the trout, which then floats to the surface, where the bildad can easily pick it up and eat it. An adult male, it is said, can execute a jump of 60 yards. For a time, lumberjacks believed bildad meat was good to eat, but the animal's intense shyness made it nearly impossible to catch. That changed 3 years ago, when one was finally killed on Boundary Pond. It was brought to the Great Northern Paper Company's camp on Hurricane Lake, where the cook, eager for a novelty, prepared a savory slumgullion. A tote road swamper named Bill Murphy was the first and only man to taste it. After a single mouthful, his body went rigid. His eyes glazed over. His hands clutched the edge of the table. Then, with a wild, inhuman yell, he rushed out of the cookhouse. He took one tremendous leap, covering 50 yards, out into the lake, adopting the same sitting posture as a bildad in mid-jump. He hit the water and sank without a trace. Since that day, no lumberjack in Maine will touch bildad meat, not even with a 10-foot pole. Back in California, among the chaparral and foothill forests, another strange hunter operates. The tripodero is a peculiar animal, defined by its bizarre locomotion. It has two contractile, telescopic legs and a tail that functions as a third support, much like a kangaroo's. This unique structure allows it to elevate itself at will, rising high above the dense chaparral to survey its surroundings, or retract its legs to move compactly through the brush. Its body is not large, but it is solidly built, and its head is almost entirely snout, a feature critical to its method of acquiring food. As it moves through the brush, it periodically extends its legs, raising itself like a living watchtower for observation. If it sights game within 10 rods, it takes aim with its snout, tilting its entire body to achieve the correct elevation. Then, with astonishing force, it blows a sun-dried quid of clay at its victim. The projectile strikes with such power that it renders the target senseless. The tripodero carries a constant supply of these clay quids in its left jaw pouch. After incapacitating its prey, it contracts its legs and bores directly through the brush to its victim, where it remains until every bone is cracked and every morsel of flesh is eaten. Some skeptics suggest the legend arose from the sight of a surveyor's tripod left discarded in the field, used by old-timers to prank newcomers about a dangerous creature. But the stories of its victims persist. Finally, we examine a creature that is not a myth, but a nuisance twisted into a monster by folklore. From the mouth of the Columbia River south to the Klamath River, there exists a small, sharp-nosed, curly-haired variety of bear known as the hog bear. It is a distinct animal, not to be confused with the peak-heel catamount. Its story is tied to the economics of northwestern California, a region perfectly suited for raising hogs. Hog ranches are common there, and they would be immensely profitable were it not for the hog bear. The mountain slopes are covered with scrubby oaks that produce vast crops of sweet, nutritious acorns. The cycle is predictable. Young hogs are released to feed on the acorns on the lower slopes as they first ripen. As the season progresses, they follow the ripening acorns weekly up the mountain, gaining incredible weight. By Christmas, the last acorns on the upper slopes are reached, and the hogs are so fat their legs can barely reach the ground. They are helpless, immobile globes of pork. It is at this precise moment, just before the ranchers can gather their animals for market, that the hog bear begins its destructive work. It mooches along the base of the mountain, finds the helplessly fat hogs, and takes just one single bite out of the back of each one. It does not kill them to eat. It maims them, leaving a herd of squealing, wounded animals and an enraged, financially ruined rancher. The cruelty is not in the predation, but in the waste. We know this animal is real. Mr. Eugene S. Bruce of the Forest Service managed to capture a cub on a tributary of the Klamath River, which was presented to the National Zoo in Washington for study. Each of these creatures, from the weeping squonk to the wasteful hog bear, tells a piece of a larger story. They are not random inventions. They are the personification of real-world dangers, of soul-crushing despair, of sudden and invisible death, of nature's violent resentment, and of economic ruin. But these are only the creatures of the land and the trees. A different, far older terror lurks in the water, a force that promises not just death, but a complete and horrifying transformation. We have established that the logging camps of the Northwoods were not places of simple, hardy labor. They were pressure cookers of isolation, exhaustion, and constant, ambient danger. The stories that grew in the flickering light of the bunkhouse fire were not just for entertainment. They were psychological maps, coded warnings, and personifications of every shadow that flickered at the edge of a lumberjack's vision. Now, we must conduct an autopsy on the fauna of that lost world. We will examine the creatures themselves, not as jokes, but as specimens, evidence of the specific fears that haunted the men who logged the great northern forests. The first specimen is not a predator of men, but a predator of their labor. It is the axe-handle hound, considered the absolute bane of supply and depot camps across the northern logging operations. You see, a man's axe was his life, his tool for survival and wages. Its failure was a constant, low-grade threat. The axe-handle hound gives that threat a face. Its form is a grotesque parody of the very tool it consumes, with a head shaped precisely like a poleaxe. This is fused to a long, slender body, the exact shape and dimension of an axe handle, carried on short, stubby legs that recall a dachshund. It is a creature literally built from the pieces of a lumberjack's broken livelihood. This creature was a nocturnal prowler, a camp follower that haunted the tool sheds and woodpiles after nightfall. It hunted not for flesh, but for the smooth, seasoned hickory of axe and peavey handles, for which it possessed a voracious and unnatural fondness. The scale of its hunger, as described in the tales, is industrial. One account insists a single axe-handle hound consumed 2 entire boxes of double-bit handles in one night. It followed this meal with 16 6-foot peavey stalks, leaving a camp crippled and unproductive by morning. The story serves as a perfect explanation for snapped handles, shoddy equipment, or even theft among tired, frustrated men. They could, the stories claimed, be tamed as pets, but this was a fool's errand. They were ruinously expensive to feed, their specialized diet being far more valuable than common table scraps. The cautionary tale of Jim Peters illustrates this perfectly. He reportedly tamed a short-sighted axe-handle hound, an act of pity or foolishness. But Jim had a wooden leg, one carved from a sturdy axe handle. The hound, driven by its singular instinct, repeatedly attempted to devour its master's limb, forcing the man to wear his prosthetic to bed every night just to protect it. Jim eventually rid himself of the pup by feeding it handles made from red oak, a wood it disliked with an intense, biological revulsion. The moral was clear: do not bring the source of your problems into your home. The stories were also used for something more immediate, for pranks that reinforced the folklore. A man might remove his friend's axe handle in the night, blaming the disappearance on the creature, a small moment of levity built on a shared, manufactured fear. Where the hound personified equipment failure, the ball-tailed cat embodied the brutal, physical violence of the woods. In its earliest days, its distribution was said to be wider, a common menace across the frontier. But now, the accounts confine it mostly to Harney County, Oregon, and Sullivan County, Pennsylvania, a retreat into the deepest wilderness. It is a fair-sized animal, its body plan similar to a wildcat, but it is possessed of a far more aggressive and predatory disposition. It is not an animal of opportunity, it is an animal of calculated ambush. Its defining physical characteristic is a weapon. At the end of its tail grows a hard, heavy, bony ball, a solid bludgeon of calcified bone. Like all true cats, it possesses sharp, clawed feet, making it an excellent and silent climber. This combination of traits makes its method of attack terrifyingly efficient. The ball-tailed cat stealthily positions itself on a heavy limb overhanging a logging trail. It waits, silent and unseen, for an unsuspecting lumberjack to pass directly beneath its perch. Then, it drops from the tree, landing squarely upon its victim. The final act is one of sickening, percussive violence. It pounds the logger to death with the bony ball on its tail, a living wrecking ball descending from the canopy. It is the perfect metaphor for the widowmaker, the falling branch that killed so many woodsmen without warning. Even its reproductive cycle is steeped in violence. During the mating season, the male of the species uses its tail ball not for hunting, but to call a female. It finds a large, hollow log and drums upon it, sending a resonant, percussive signal through the forest. This creature has often been confused by amateur cryptozoologists with the silver cat and the more obscure dingwall. However, careful study of the tails shows they are distinct species, though perhaps distantly related through some shared, violent ancestry in the logger's imagination. The ball-tailed cat is a pure predator, its existence a direct threat to any man walking alone under the trees. Further west, in the remote mountains of Washington, another creature lurked. The Columbia River sand squink had a very limited distribution, its existence reported only by the most isolated of men: prospectors, lone hunters, and wandering sheep herders. It was an amalgam of familiar forms, built with characteristics of both a coyote and a bobcat, but crowned with the long, sensitive ears of a jackrabbit. Its tail was unusual, long and exceptionally bushy, and it carried it recurved along its back, much like a squirrel. This chimera was a product of the deep, disorienting solitude of the high country. The sand squink was a nocturnal prowler, emerging only after dark to fish in the cold, fast-running river. It was not said to be particular about its diet, consuming whatever it could catch. However, it had one overriding, bizarre preference: a strong and insatiable hunger for electric eels, which it pursued for what the storytellers theorized was their high pH content. This strange diet was the key to its predatory nature. When hungry, the creature was timid and retiring, but after a full meal of eels, its courage returned magnified. It would then boldly stalk the mountain trails, seeking out human prey. Its hunting method was not one of physical violence, but of hypnotic, technological horror. Upon sighting a prospector returning from a trip to town, the squink would silently move ahead of its victim by a distance of 2 or 3 rods, roughly 10 to 15 meters. It would then begin to slowly wave its long, bushy tail, first touching one of its jackrabbit ears, and then the other. Charged with massive amounts of static electricity from its heavy meal of electric eels, these alternating contacts produced a series of brilliant, blue-white electrical discharges. The flashes would invariably attract and please the lonely traveler, who, mesmerized by the strange light show, would follow it deeper into the wilderness, never to be seen again. The tail is a chilling warning against the strange and the beautiful in a landscape where anything out of the ordinary is a potential threat. Several nests of the sand squink have reportedly been found, their construction adding a layer of industrial strangeness. They were lined not with moss or fur, but with shredded portions of old inner tubes. And because the squink is oviparous, laying eggs, its offspring begin life in shells made of pure bakelite, the early plastic. It is a monster born of both nature and the encroaching machine age. Not all creatures were fatal. Some were simply agents of pure, jarring disorientation. The catamount body, reported by a Mr. B. B. Bickford of Gorham, New Hampshire, was not found outside the White Mountains. It was described as a short, stubby, small animal, its build resembling a common woodchuck. Its most notable feature was its fur, which was said to be very soft, velvety, and kitten-like to the touch. This creature was entirely harmless, a fact which made its primary habit all the more unnerving. It would hide in the dense brush alongside a trail, and then suddenly rush directly at a person, stopping only a few inches from their feet. It would then spit, like an agitated cat, and simultaneously emit a strong, overpowering mink-like scent before vanishing back into the woods as quickly as it appeared. The encounter was pointless, shocking, and left its victim with nothing but a racing heart and a foul smell, a perfect metaphor for a sudden, inexplicable fright in the woods. The dingmal, however, was a far more complex and well-known entity in the same White Mountains. Its name is memorialized in the landscape itself, with Dingmal Rock, located high above the timberline between Mount Adams and Mount Jefferson in the Presidential Range. 2 distinct varieties of dingmal were said to exist, a northeastern species and a Californian one, though both were decidedly cat-like in their general appearance. They were described as long, slim creatures, slick-looking gentlemen of the forest, with pelts that resembled a wolf's. Their bodies were unusually long, with short, powerful legs, a form that the writer Irving Cobb once compared to a carpet sweeper. The head was round and sessile, sitting directly upon the shoulders, with classic feline features, tufted ears and eyes that glowed in the dark. Neither variety was considered harmful to humans. Instead, both possessed a curious and deeply inquisitive nature. They enjoyed lying in open, sunny spots, like the eponymous Dingwall Rock, where they would spend hours scrutinizing the activities of men in the valleys below, silent, leisurely observers of the logging industry. The tail of the dingwall was its most remarkable feature, very long and often growing to twice the length of its body. It was here that the two species diverged. The California variety had a medium-sized bony ball at the end of its tail, a clear echo of its more violent cousin, the ball-tailed cat. This ball, however, was a tool, not a weapon of malice. It was used for various purposes, to ward off pesky flies in the summer heat and to pound on dead trees, creating soft, pulpy slivers of wood for lining its nest. For the male, the ball served a vital role in courtship. During mating season, he would beat it upon his own chest to call his mate. The female also possessed a ball, slightly larger than the male's, which she used, according to the loggers, to beat him with when he gets too obstreperous. One forest ranger, Bill Goss, claimed to have observed a California dingwall galloping along a mountain crest. Its ball tail lashing about and striking trees with tremendous force, likening it to the biggest kindling cat he had ever seen. The vocalizations also differed by region. The eastern species, cry, was a dreadful, horrendous wail that echoed through the mountains, while the western variety's call sounded uncannily like the toot of a logging donkey's steam whistle. But for all their differences, the females of both species shared one peculiar habit. They invariably gave birth on top of a large, exposed rock, bringing their young into the world in full view of the sky. From the merely curious, we descend again into the lethally dangerous. The Dungaven hooter, once common from Maine to Michigan, is now a creature of rarity, only occasionally encountered on the upper peninsula of the Lake States. It is a dweller of marshes and swamps, and it is exceedingly dangerous to human beings. Its appearance is reptilian, resembling a swamp alligator, but its anatomy is a nightmare. It possesses abnormally large nostrils but has no mouth whatsoever. It moves on short, powerful legs and carries a thick, muscular tail. Its only cry is a loud, explosive snort. The hooter hunts with what the storytellers called satanic cunning. It conceals itself behind a whiffle bush near a swampy trail, awaiting passing loggers. When a victim comes within reach of its powerful tail, it strikes, knocking the man senseless with a single blow. What happens next is a form of horrifying alchemy. The hooter pounds the unconscious victim steadily and relentlessly. It does not stop until the body has been rendered entirely gaseous, broken down into its constituent vapors. Only then does the creature act, greedily inhaling the vaporized logger through its wide, gaping nostrils. The tales add a grim detail. Prey that is rum-soaked, meaning loggers who have been drinking heavily, is sought with particular eagerness. This creature represents a fear of the swamp, of disappearing without a trace, and a dark joke about the dangers of alcohol in a perilous environment. Not all threats were physical. Some were philosophical, embodying a kind of cosmic absurdity. The Philamalu bird is one such creature, a peculiar character varying widely from any typical feathered animal and known for what was described as a low intellectual curiosity. This bird shows a complete and total indifference to its destination. It cares only to see where it has just been, and for this reason, it always flies backward. It is a rare species, a creature more frequently heard of than seen, with very few authentic reports of its observation. Its appearance is as nonsensical as its behavior. It has a turkey-like head perched on a long, bottle-green neck, a neck that is sparsely spangled with large, silvery scales. Its wings are a study in asymmetry. It has a black right wing and a pink left wing, creating a bizarre color combination in flight. This backward-flying creature also builds its nest upside down, a detail of pure, defiant strangeness. Its eggs, which are always laid in clutches of 7, are invariably of the lowest quality. What retailers would call grade D, even its call is mechanical and unnatural, resembling the clank of a Johnson bar being shoved into reverse on a steam locomotive. It is known by other names, such as the goofus bird or the foo fly bird. There may be a sliver of reality here. Some species of storks or cranes can momentarily glide backward in certain wind conditions, suggesting a potential real-world inception point for this legend of perpetual reverse travel. From the sky, we move to the burnt lands, the desolate landscapes left behind by forest fires. Here lived the gumberoo, an uncommon but well-known and authenticated animal. It was a creature frequently encountered by Paul Bunyan himself in the so-called upside-down country. Bunyan's own description is the most vivid. He said it had a pot-bellied body, shaped almost exactly like a bunkhouse stove, complete with a strange, navel-like feature he called an umbilical damper. This body was covered with very tight, tough, black, shiny skin, like stretched rubber or leather. It had a pair of long, powerful monkey-like forearms and a small, round head with no neck, which sat directly on its shoulders. Its locomotion was a complex affair. The gumberoo possessed 3 bowed rear legs, and each of its clawed feet perpetually clutched a solid iron ball, giving it the appearance of an old cast iron stove. These rear legs were not built for speed, but were useful for wading dumps or navigating treacherous terrain. For actual travel, it had 8 pairs of strong, springy legs arranged around its middle. To get to a hilltop, it would swing from branch to branch with its powerful forelegs, and then toss itself a rod or two 5 to 10 meters through the air. It would land sideways on its many middle legs and then roll over and over down the hill, moving, it was said, faster than the eye can see. This incredible speed is the primary reason for its rare observation. Hides from its middle legs were once prized for making fine, waterproof boots, but they are now exceptionally scarce. The gumberoo was usually found in burnt-over lands and was practically indestructible. Bullets would simply bounce off its tough, rubbery hide. Its only weakness was heat. If exposed to a significant fire, its body would swell and then explode violently. The photographer S.W. Allen, a real person who chronicled these tales, claimed to have photographed a gumberoo, but the photographic negative itself later exploded, destroying the only known image. The gumberoo is one of the few fearsome critters to directly cross over into the Paul Bunyan mythos. Paul Bunyan, the giant lumberjack of American folklore, was a figure whose stories described feats like creating the Grand Canyon with a drag of his axe. The stories of Bunyan and the critters were part of the same oral tradition, exchanged around the same campfires, blurring the line between epic hero and backwoods horror. And then there is the fear of being watched, the fear of what you cannot see. This is the domain of the Hidebehind. The Hidebehind is a highly dangerous animal, but its legend contains a very specific and very convenient loophole. It has an intense, instinctual aversion to the odor of alcohol. It will never attack an inebriated person. The storytellers claimed that 1 bottle of vino, beer, was a complete safeguard against attack, even in the most heavily infested regions. This detail served as both a punchline and a license for loggers to drink. It is described as a large beast, standing about 6 feet or 1.8 meters tall and walking fully upright. Its body is impossibly slender, a trait that allows it to hide completely behind a tree trunk as small as 10 inches in diameter. The creature is covered in a pelt of long, thick, black fur, and its tail is carried recurved, similar to that of a French sheepdog. It is said to be almost impossible to discern its direction of movement, or to even locate its face, if it has one at all. Its short, well-muscled forelegs are equipped with claws like a grizzly bear. Its diet consists chiefly of intestines. It hunts by leaping from its hiding place with a demoniacal laugh, swiftly disemboweling its victim with a single, devastating swipe of its claws. In some versions of the tale, a fiendish howl alone is enough to frighten its prey to death before the physical attack even occurs. The Hidebehind always conceals itself behind tree trunks. It is never, ever seen in the open. Its marvelously quick, stealthy gait allows it to constantly stay behind its prey. No matter how quickly a suspicious and terrified victim spins around, the Hidebehind is always faster, always already concealed behind them. The creature can allegedly survive for 7 years without eating, meaning its patience is as infinite as its stealth. Its elusive nature, with no one living to describe its true appearance, allowed storytellers to freely embellish its features, contributing to wildly varying regional legends. The hide-behind's absolute ability to remain unseen makes it a terrifying presence, a personification of paranoia, always just out of sight. The folklore implies a dangerous choice. Alcohol protects you from the hide-behind, but it makes you more appealing to the rum-seeking Dungaven hooter. You can never be truly safe. Some creatures were less myth and more persistent rumor, like the hoop snake. This was a well-known menace, its existence supposedly supported by numerous reports from credible individuals across the country. Its characteristic behavior involves tucking its tail into its mouth to form a perfect circle, and then rolling at incredible speed in pursuit of prey or its perceived enemies. This unique method of locomotion, a living wheel, is not duplicated by any other known animal in folklore or reality. The danger lay in its tail, which terminates in a venomous stinger. The venom was said to be so potent that a mere 0.0003 parts per million was sufficient to kill even a leather-skinned hog within an hour. Wood's lore advised extreme caution, for the combination of its deadly venom and its unnatural speed made it a formidable threat. The hoop snake's rolling velocity was legendary. A full-grown jackrabbit was considered easy prey for it. A mature snake, when whooped, had a diameter of approximately 1.5923 feet. It had been clocked, the tails claimed with scientific precision, at approximately 1,056 revolutions per minute. This equated to a straightaway speed of about 60 miles per hour on a rolling meter platform. There was only one reliable method of escape: to climb over a fence. The snake, unable to roll over the obstacle, would have to unhoop to pass through, giving its victim a precious few seconds to get away. Numerous authentic cases of death were attributed to this reptile's venom, but the most convincing piece of data, in the world of the tall tale, involved Paul Bunyan. A hoop snake once struck one of Paul's massive peavey handles. The venom was so powerful that it caused the sizable hickory handle to swell to such enormous dimensions that Paul was able to cut it up into 946 cords of wood. But the venom had permeated the very fibers of the timber. When they tried to burn this wood in the bunkhouse stove, it would not catch fire. It only sat there and hissed. The hoop snake became one of the most popular fearsome critters, often referenced in westerns and other frontier stories, a testament to its terrifyingly simple and effective concept: a venomous, living wheel of death. Finally, we come to a creature of pure, arbitrary rules. The lumberland is a dangerous animal, highly prone to unprovoked attacks. It bites only once a year, but when it does, its bite is invariably fatal. Its unique identifying features include a dark blue stripe running down its spine and a bushy, swivel-jointed tail. This tail is bizarrely positioned in the middle of its back, a location supposedly useful for warding off flies from all directions. All four of its legs are triple-jointed, an anatomical marvel that allows it to run equally fast forwards, backwards, or sideways. The rules for survival were incredibly specific. In the event of an attack, a victim should suddenly hold a large mirror up beside themselves. The double image confuses the beast, causing it to rush off in disgust. The danger was not constant, however. The biting season was a single day, July 12th. During this 24-hour period, displaying an orange-colored handkerchief conspicuously was said to provide full protection. Conversely, green clothing of any shade should be avoided at all costs during the biting season, as the color further arouses the animal's aggression. These arbitrary rules mirrors, orange cloth, the color green. A single date transformed the creature from a simple predator into a kind of malicious riddle, a test of a woodsman's knowledge of esoteric lore. These creatures, from the tool eater to the soul inhaler, are the monsters born of work and fear. They are the explanation for every snapped handle, every falling branch, every strange sound, and every man who walked into the woods and never returned. They are the folklore of the working man pushed to his absolute limit, but these were just the animals. There were other things in the woods, things that looked like men but were not. And it is there, in the uncanny valley of the deep forest, that we must look next. We have walked together through the deep, quiet woods of the American psyche, tracing the outlines of monsters born from isolation and exhaustion. We have seen how the laughter of the logging camp was a shield against the vast, pressing darkness. Now, in this final survey, we examine the remaining evidence, the last specimens in this taxonomy of fear. You think these are just tall tales. They are not. They are autopsy reports of the mind, filed from the edge of the known world. The creature known as the rum-tum tiddly-tum tiddly-tum-tum tiddly rum-tum-tum tiddly cell, or more simply the rum-tick cell, does not hunt with speed. It does not need to. It is a slow-gated beast. A patient predator that understands the true weakness of its prey is not a lack of strength, but an excess of greed. It uses cunning to lure its victims, playing upon the simple, fatal human desire for a windfall. This is a creature that weaponizes your own cupidity against you. Imagine it. The rum-tick cell is described as large, strong, and ferocious, covered in a fine, long, thick pelt of a rich mink-like color. Its most unsettling feature is its body, an unusually flattened form. The old woodsmen said it resembled old Hank Maginnis after he rolled off a porch roof and, in their grimly poetic term, spread himself out. This flattened shape is its primary tool of deception. The rum-tick cell drapes itself over a stump or the butt of a tree near a tote road, those rough-hewn arteries of the forest, and appears for all the world like a high-grade fur coat or a luxurious robe, discarded and waiting to be claimed. A passerby, a lonely timber cruiser or a trapper heading back to camp, sees this impossible prize and naturally approaches for a closer look. In that moment of avarice, the trap is sprung. With a lightning-fast flick of its blanket-like body, the rum-tick cell completely envelops its victim. The true horror lies on its inner ventral surface, a hidden landscape of numerous minute sucking pores. Once activated, these pores work with horrifying efficiency, rapidly cleaning the bones of the unfortunate soul. All that remains are small, innocuous balls of fur, sometimes found beside old stumps. Scientists might dismiss these as mere owl pellets, the indigestible remains of small rodents. But the lore offers a darker explanation. These are the shredded, balled-up clothes of a greenhorn, the only evidence left of a man who saw a free lunch and became a meal. The legend of the rum-tick cell is not just a story. It is a cautionary tale, a stark warning against the temptation of abandoned belongings in the woods, a practical lesson to never let your greed blind you to the dangers of a place that does not know your name. Below the Mason-Dixon line, in the swamps of western North Carolina, a different kind of terror was reported. Here lived the marauding varmint known as the snorter or santer. It was rarely considered dangerous to humans, focusing its destructive energy instead on the livestock that represented a settler's entire livelihood. Its body was long, a sinuous shape covered with reddish long hair. It possessed a large, round, bald head from which two small, mean-looking eyes stared out. But its true weapon was its tail, an appendage almost as long as its body and featuring 8 hard knots, resembling a string of morbid beads. This tail could be swung with significant power and devastating skill, capable of knocking out a full-grown cow or a hog with a single, well-aimed slap. Despite this formidable weapon, the snorter rarely engaged in direct combat. Its greatest defense was its remarkable speed, a velocity so profound that the creature was seldom even seen. It lived mostly in the wooded swamps near small villages, close enough to prey on the cattle and hogs kept there. Its cry was a piercing, unsettling, baby-like wail that would cut through the humid night air, a sound that dogs, for all their bravery, rarely dared to pursue. The physical evidence of a snorter attack was distinctive. A cat reportedly killed by one near Statesville exhibited a chilling pattern of injuries: 8 distinct bruises, 7 across its body, and 1 on a broken foreleg. Around each bruise, the fur was singed, as if struck by something with unnatural force and heat. The description of this elusive creature, with its destructive power and reptilian tail, evokes the ancient archetypes of dragons in old European folklore, a monster transplanted to the American swamp. From the swamps we move to the hills, the domain of the side-hill gouger. This creature is a dweller in hilly country, not by choice, but by anatomical necessity. Its defining characteristic is a severe asymmetry. Its nigh legs are shorter than its off pair, forcing it to live its entire life on an incline. Litters typically consisted of 6 to 8 pups, but occasionally, some were born as sports with the reversed leg orientation. These abnormal young, once weaned, were rarely seen again by their orthodox-legged siblings, forever destined to circle the same hills in the opposite direction. For the normal gougers, travel was a one-way affair, forever circling the hillsides in a specific direction. Their constant, unidirectional daily rounds for food created characteristic, partly gouged-out paths that became deeply familiar to woodsmen. These trails were once a common sight in the hills of New England and are now frequently seen in the partly forested regions of the West. The storyteller Bill Erickson of North Haven, Maine, recounted a legend of the gouger population's Great Migration. He claimed that overcrowding and food scarcity in New England forced a pair of ambitious gougers, one orthodox with shorter left legs and one abnormal legged with shorter right legs, to seek new territory. To navigate the flat terrain of the heartland, they devised a brilliant solution. They leaned against each other, their longer legs positioned outermost for stability. In this configuration, they hobbled across the central states, resembling, as Erickson put it, a pair of drunks going home from town. This ingenious adaptation allowed them to cross the plains and establish the now thriving gouger colonies in the West. The legend, of course, serves a purpose. It provides a beautifully strange and organic explanation for the origin of game trails or the paths of desire that scar hillsides everywhere. In the northern pine woods dwells a predator of a different sort, the slippery cat, also known as the sliver cat. This beast is harmless on the ground, but in the canopy, it is an arboreal nightmare. It is a large animal, a formidable predator sometimes weighing up to 300 pounds. Its ears are tasseled, and its eyes are a piercing red, marked with strange horizontal slits. A mature slippery cat is distinguished by its incredible tail, an 11-foot-long appendage ending in a hard, bony ball. This ball is a dual-purpose tool. Half of it is polished smooth as glass, while the other half is studded with a burr-like, barbed growth. Much like the more peaceful dingwall cat, it beats the smooth side of this ball on its chest during mating season, a percussive call to its mate. The primary function of its tail, however, is for obtaining food. This is a more violent rendition of the ball-tailed cat legend. The slippery cat crouches on a limb overhanging a trail, waiting. When a victim passes below, it gently taps the person on the head with the polished side of its tail ball, a swift, precise blow to render them senseless. Before the body can fall, the cat slaps the barbed side of the ball into the victim's hide, snagging them like a fish on a hook. It then pulls the unconscious form up into the tree to be consumed at its leisure. The image of a slippery cat crouched on a limb, its tail poised for action, creates what the old loggers called a startling silhouette against the full moon, a vision of patient, calculated violence waiting in the branches above. Then there are the creatures born of extreme weather, of conditions so alien they could only produce alien life. Such was the snow snake, which first appeared during the year of the two winters, a mythic season when the July temperature supposedly dropped to a bone, shattering negative 62 degrees Fahrenheit. These were pink-eyed, white-bodied savage serpents that were said to have migrated from Siberia, crossing the frozen Bering Strait. They are considered exceptionally dangerous, with a venom so deadly and rapid in its action that it is said to be second only to the mythical hoop snake or the hamadryad of Asia. They hibernate in the summer heat, but become terrifyingly active in the winter. The snow snake's method of hunting is pure camouflage. They coil on low snowdrifts, their pure white color rendering them utterly invisible against the landscape. A single strike is all that is required to kill their prey. Humans are not frequently bitten, as the logger's joke goes, because they are too big a mouthful, but occasionally a snake becomes over-ambitious. The only known remedy for a snow snake bite, according to the lore, is a dose of tanglefoot oil, a likely euphemism for whiskey. This creature became a perfect alibi, and the excuse, "I was treed by a snow snake," became a commonly used explanation for a man returning late to his wife or his logging camp, reeking of saloon spirits. Not all threats came from the land. The freshwater lakes held their own peculiar dangers, like the swamp auger. This creature, often mistaken for an old, waterlogged snag, possessed a swiveled proboscis, a grotesque snout specifically adapted for boring perfect 3-inch holes in the bottoms of boats. Yet, for all its destructive capability, the lore grants it a comical weakness. Its work can be stopped by either tickling its snout or sprinkling it with cayenne pepper. Either procedure causes the auger to sneeze with tremendous violence, a sensation it apparently enjoys. During its prolonged sneezing fit, it will hold its nose tightly in the hole it has just drilled, giving the boatman just enough time to beach his vessel before it sinks. The forest itself seemed to have a voice, and not always a friendly one. The mating call of the tree squeak is often mistaken for the rubbing of a dry tree branch lodged in a schoolmarm, a tree with a forked trunk. But this sound is made by what is described as an untrustworthy animal. Still common in the Northwoods, it is built somewhat like a weasel and shares its aggressive disposition. The tree squeak is a master of camouflage, a chameleon-like creature capable of wrapping itself around a tree trunk and precisely matching the color and texture of the bark. It is sometimes aggressive, but only after a long dry spell, as if thirst drives it to madness. It possesses a terrifying variety of calls, a wail like a panther, a squeal like a young pig, and sometimes a roar like a bunch of cannon crackers at a shotgun wedding. The old advice was simple and direct. Look out for him on windy days along toward sundown. Then there is the wampus cat, a creature that serves as a scapegoat for every misfortune that can befall a man in the mountains of Idaho. It was first discovered scratching false blazes on mountain trails, deliberately trying to lead travelers astray. Since then, it has been blamed for a vast catalog of forest tribulations. If a wampus wades through a stream, the fish will not bite for 7 days. When the wampus is on the prowl, the only game that dares to be active is the full hen. Its howl on a lonely night is said to be so malevolent that it can curdle a crock of sourdough from a mile away. The wampus cat is nearly indestructible. The females can only be killed with a crosscut saw, a tool requiring 2 men. The males are practically immortal and are said to carry the germ of blister rust in their fur, spreading disease through the pines. Under a full moon, the glare from their eyes is so intense it is said to start forest fires. Their footprints are not found in mud or snow, they are visible only in solid rock. They steal prospectors' picks, not for any practical purpose, but to brush their teeth. The wampus cat remains abundant in its native Idaho, and it is said to grow particularly large and violent during the season when dudes yield a bushel to the picket line, a reference to tourists being plentiful. Yet, this agent of chaos was given an opportunity to redeem itself. The eagles of the Salmon River had become a problem for trappers, killing the deer that were a vital source of meat. The Wampus Society, a fictional group composed of those who have seen a rampant wampus cat at dusk menacing a mountain lion with a jackhammer, suggested turning this eagle problem over to the wampus breed. The marvelous cat possesses an amazing right forearm that functions like a folding pruning hook on a pantographic principle. It lurks on craggy promontories, its tufted ears like the budding prongs of a young goat, and softens its voice from a banshee's howl to a kid's bleat to lure its prey. When an eagle approaches, the strange arm shoots out with astonishing speed and precision, catching the great bird and reeling it in. The lore also notes, tellingly, that the wampus cat is at peace with the native people of the land, which is why its fur is never found for sale at the trade posts. The absurdity escalates with creatures of the hunt, designed not to explain a fear, but to perpetrate a joke. The whifflepoof is a tasty fish found exclusively in perfectly round lakes, making it exceedingly rare. To catch one, the instructions are precise. One must row to the exact center of the lake, using a hog yoke to determine the position, and then bore a perfect square hole in the water. The edge of this hole must be baited with a bit of cheese, with specific preferences noted for Brie, Stilton, Limburger, or Liederkron. The whifflepoof, it is said, quickly scents the bait and comes for it. Upon its emergence from the square hole, the fisherman must act quickly, spit tobacco juice directly in its eye. This action causes the fish to swell with such rage that it becomes too large to withdraw back into the hole. In this inflated, trapped state, it can be easily netted. The story of the Whifflepoof is pure misdirection, a classic practical joke or a gag designed to send a newcomer, a greenhorn, on an absurd and impossible hunting quest, all for the amusement of the seasoned veterans. This tradition of the fool's errand is most famously embodied by the snipe. The snipe is a common bird, one that is occasionally seen but has never, ever been successfully caught. Legions of young foresters, engineers, cruisers, cooks, rodmen, and hard rock apprentices have made numerous valiant attempts to corral one. They are always given extensive and contradictory advice from the older, more experienced individuals who watch the farce unfold. These seasoned woodsmen seldom attempt to catch a snipe themselves, often joining the hunting parties merely to observe or to offer occasional, unhelpful advice from the sidelines. One detailed and entirely fabricated report from a Mr. Howard S. Gardner describes the snipe as a bird of marvelous coloration, a creature of iridescent greens, blues, pinks, and glints of gold. It wears both fur and feathers, with the fur conveniently located on the inside for warmth. It stands erect at 17 centimeters high on two legs, but possesses a third, auxiliary, slightly aped leg. This third leg serves as either a stabilizer or a starting mechanism. Without it, the snipe would experience a permanent and fatal unstable equilibrium. Its eyes emit a constant, low sulfurous glow, occasionally producing small showers of sparks. One pupil is vertical, the other horizontal, and they wink alternately to maintain constant, 36-degree alertness. A sharply hooked little beak is mounted on a bullwheel base like a steam shovel, enabling it to capture insects from any direction without turning its head. The fur and feathers combination provides an ideal protective coat for its marshy habitat. When swimming, its rigid feathers fold back to form a smooth outer surface, minimizing skin friction, while the internal fur maintains core warmth and provides perfect waterproofing. These creatures, from the malevolent to the absurd, are more than just jokes. They are the psychological residue of a nation's expansion into a continent that was vast, untamed, and indifferent to human survival. They are coded warnings about greed, explanations for strange tracks on a hillside, alibis for drunkenness, and elaborate rituals for hazing newcomers into a harsh and exclusive world. We have cataloged the evidence, from the rum tick cell's predatory deceit to the snipe's impossible anatomy. The thesis we began with is now a verdict. These stories were never meant to make children sleep. They were meant to make grown men wake up. Fearsome critters are not comfort.